I thought I was planning a surprise birthday party for my husband. I had the caterer on speed dial, 37 text messages with my best friend Maya about flower arrangements, and a reservation at the restaurant where Daniel and I had our first date 7 years ago. What I didn't know, what I had no possible way of knowing, was that while I was folding linen napkins into swans and tasting caramel cake samples alone at our kitchen table, my husband and my best friend were together in our bedroom. In the bedroom I had repainted myself last spring, the one with the sage green walls I chose after 3 weeks of deliberation, the one where I still kept a framed photo of Maya and me on the dresser, right next to Daniel's cufflinks and his grandfather's watch. And that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what I found when I finally understood. A folder on Daniel's laptop, labeled with a single quiet word: receipts. Inside it, hotel bookings going back 14 months. 14 months. While I was sampling caramel frosting and writing handwritten place cards for his guests, they had already passed their 1-year anniversary. My name is Clara Whitfield, though for 6 years I had been Clara Marsh, and for most of those 6 years I had been genuinely, quietly happy. Not the loud, Instagram-worthy kind of happiness, not champagne at sunrise or spontaneous flights to Paris, but the steady, warm kind. The kind that smells like fresh coffee and morning light coming through half-open linen blinds. The kind that feels like an old flannel shirt, soft from too many washes draped around your shoulders on a Sunday afternoon when there is nowhere you need to be and nothing you need to prove. Daniel and I had met at a mutual friend's housewarming party, both of us in our late 20s, both of us slightly out of place. He had been standing in the corner, overdressed in a blazer that was a shade too blue, holding a glass of wine he clearly didn't want, looking like a man who had agreed to come and immediately regretted it. I had walked over because I recognized that expression. I was wearing the exact same one. And we had talked for 4 hours without noticing the party thinning around us. He was thoughtful and funny in an understated way, the kind of person who listened more than he spoke and remembered the small things. Your coffee order. The name of your sister's cat, which subway stop made your commute easier. 2 years after that party, we were married in a garden outside the city. Fairy lights strung between old oak trees, the late summer air smelling of roses and warm earth. Maya stood right beside me in a dusty rose bridesmaid dress, crying before I had even made it halfway down the aisle. I remember laughing at her through my own tears. I remember thinking, this is what family looks like. Maya Chen. My best friend since the first week of university, when we had been assigned adjacent rooms in the dormitory, and she had knocked on my door to borrow a phone charger and stayed for 3 hours talking about books and terrible professors and what we wanted from our lives. She was bright and fierce and funny in the way that makes a room feel larger. Not because she demanded attention, but because she radiated it effortlessly. She was the person I called when I got my first real promotion, when my mother was diagnosed and I sat in a hospital parking lot unable to start the car, when Daniel and I had our first serious fight. The one about money 2 years into the marriage, the one that had shaken me more than I'd let on to anyone. Maya had talked me through all of it. She had sat across from me at kitchen tables and coffee shop counters and on the floor of my living room at 2 a.m. with a bottle of wine between us, and she had always known what to say. I had trusted her the way you trust gravity. Without thinking about it, without needing a reason, without ever imagining the ground might simply not be there one day. Our house was a 3-bedroom craftsman in a quiet neighborhood 15 minutes from downtown. We had bought it 4 years ago, stretching our budget in a way that had kept both of us awake for several nights, and then slowly, over years, we had made it ours. The kitchen had open wooden shelves lined with the mismatched vintage plates I collected from flea markets and estate sales. The back garden had a small stone patio with 2 iron chairs and a round table we'd found by the side of the road and painted white. The living room had a deep sofa the color of old caramel, 2 floor lamps that pooled warm amber light in the evenings, and a bookshelf running the entire length of one wall. Daniel's history books and my fiction novels in an easy, overlapping coexistence that had always seemed to me like a metaphor for us. I was a project manager at an architecture firm downtown, organized, reliable, the person everyone called when a schedule was unraveling or a client had changed their mind for the 5th time. Daniel taught high school history and coached the debate team on Thursday afternoons. He complained affectionately about his students and occasionally sat at the kitchen table with a stack of papers, a red pen and a glass of whiskey, scowling and annotating in a way I found quietly endearing. It was a good life. It was not a spectacular life, but it was real, and it was ours, and I believed in it completely. I want to say I saw the signs. Looking back, they are always there, arranged so neatly in hindsight, like stones you could have followed out of the forest if only you'd been looking down instead of straight ahead. But I need to be honest. I did not see them, or I saw them and gave them a different shape, because the shape they actually held was one I could not bring myself to examine directly. The way you learn not to look at a crack in the wall, because the moment you look at it, you'll have to decide what to do about it. It started, or at least this is where I place it now, when I reconstruct the timeline with the cold clarity of someone who has already survived it, about 8 months before everything fell apart. A Tuesday evening in February, the sky the particular dull pewter of a Chicago winter, the kitchen smelling of garlic and olive oil. I had made pasta. Daniel came home 20 minutes later than usual, said there had been a faculty meeting that ran long. He kissed me on the cheek, a quick, distracted brush of lips that landed just a fraction off its usual mark, and went upstairs to change without sitting down at the kitchen table the way he normally did, without asking about my day, without reaching past me to steal a piece of bread from the cutting board, which had been a habit of his for years. Such a small thing. I noticed it the way you notice a clock that has stopped. Not with alarm, but with a low, unplaceable unease. I set it aside. I served the pasta. Then there was a Saturday in March. Maya and I had standing plans for the farmer's market, a ritual we had kept for 3 years, every other Saturday, rain or shine, always ending with coffee and a shared cinnamon roll at the bakery on the corner. She canceled at the last minute. Migraine, she said. I sent her a voice message, told her to rest, went alone. I bought her a small jar of clover honey, the way I always did, a running joke that had started when she'd once complained that the only acceptable cure for a bad day was toast with good honey. Daniel had seemed distracted all morning. When I came home, he was in the backyard standing near the far fence with his phone pressed to his ear. He ended the call when he heard the back door. I asked who he'd been speaking with. He said a parent from school, a difficult conversation about a student who was failing. His voice had a careful, flat quality I didn't recognize. I put the groceries on the counter and didn't ask again. April brought a pattern I recognized only later. Daniel started going to the gym on Wednesday evenings, something he had talked about for years but never actually done. He bought new running shoes, a nicer gym bag, a deodorant that smelled different from the one he had used since we met. Small upgrades. I remember thinking with genuine warmth that he was taking better care of himself. I remember feeling glad. I remember thinking, this is what 7 years looks like. You grow, you change, you buy new running shoes. I did not think, this is what a man looks like when he is preparing himself for someone else's eyes. Maya, too, was changing in small ways that I catalogued without understanding. She became harder to reach, not dramatically, not in a way that alarmed me, but consistently just a few beats slower to return a text, just slightly more vague about her weekends when I asked. In June, I suggested we book a long weekend away for her birthday in August, the way we had done twice before. She said she'd have to check her calendar and let me know. She never confirmed. I told myself she was busy, that she was going through something. She had mentioned offhand in May that she and the man she'd been seeing for 2 years, a quiet, patient architect named Tom, were having problems. I felt sorry for her. I offered to listen whenever she was ready. She said she was fine, just processing. I did not push. I trusted her. That is the thing about trust. It is not passive. It is an active, daily choice. A deliberate lowering of your guard, a decision to extend belief before evidence demands it. I had chosen to trust both of them every day without question for years. And the cruelest part of what they did was not just the betrayal itself, but the way they let me keep choosing it, day after day, while they built something in the dark that was, in every sense, the opposite of what I thought we all were to each other. I had no idea the party I was planning would be the last act of a woman who no longer existed. The discovery did not happen the way I had imagined betrayals happening, in some dramatic cinematic moment where the truth announces itself with the force of a slap. It happened quietly. It happened because of a dead laptop battery and a charger that was 3 feet out of reach. It was a Thursday evening in late September. Daniel was at school for a late debate practice session. Or so he had told me that morning over breakfast, kissing my temple, pouring the last of the coffee into his travel mug. I was working from home that afternoon, sitting on the living room sofa with my own laptop open, editing a project timeline when my screen went dark. The charger was on the desk across the room. I got up, walked to the desk, and that's when I noticed Daniel's laptop was open. Not just open, but awake. A small notification blinking in the corner of the screen. I wouldn't have looked. I want to be clear about that. I had never gone through his phone, never read his emails, never done any of the things that, in another version of this story, might have made me the suspicious wife. I had no reason to look. I had every reason to trust him. But the notification was from a calendar app, and it was visible without unlocking anything, and it said in plain, sans serif text, Hotel Renard, 6:30 p.m., room 214. I stood at the desk for a long moment. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Somewhere outside, a car passed slowly, its headlights sweeping briefly across the window. I looked at the notification. I read it again. Hotel Renard, 6:30 p.m. tonight. And Daniel was supposed to be at a debate practice that ended, he had told me, at 7. My hand was already moving before I'd made a conscious decision. I touched the trackpad. The screen brightened. There was no password. Daniel never used one at home, always said it was unnecessary. And the calendar app was open in full. I could see the entry. Hotel Renard recurring every other Thursday for the past... I scrolled back, my mouth going dry. 11 months. I scrolled further. The earliest entry was October of last year. A small sound came out of me that I didn't recognize, something between a breath and a word that didn't form. I pressed my hand flat on the desk to steady myself. The wood was cold under my palm. Then I saw the folder. It was on the desktop, half hidden behind an open browser window I'd shifted aside without meaning to. A plain folder icon labeled Receipts. Something in me, some last desperate instinct of self-preservation, told me not to open it. I opened it anyway. Inside were 47 PDF files. Hotel receipts, restaurant bookings, a jeweler's receipt for a bracelet I had never seen and would not have recognized. Rose gold, engraved, $230. The hotels were all in the city or just outside it. Hotel Renard, the Marquette, the Lakeview Inn. The restaurants were places Daniel and I had never gone together, places he must have carefully chosen because they held no association with our life. I opened one hotel receipt at random, checked in under his name. One room, I opened another. Same. I opened the jeweler's receipt and stared at the engraving description for a long time. For M, always yours. D for M. The room tilted. That is the only way I can describe it. Not that I moved, but that the room itself shifted, as if the floor had rolled gently to one side and then back, and I was the only thing in it that hadn't been secured down. My legs were not working correctly. I sat down in Daniel's desk chair without meaning to, and the leather made a small sound under my weight, and I sat there with the laptop in front of me and M burning behind my eyes like a brand. For M, always yours, Maya. I sat with that for a moment that felt both instantaneous and endless. The whole architecture of the past year rearranged itself in real time. Every canceled plan, every short text, every slightly off-mark kiss, every Wednesday gym session, every careful vague answer. And it all snapped into a new formation with a clarity that was almost physical, like a joint popping back into place. Except that nothing in my body felt right. Everything felt wrong. Wrong in a way that went deeper than thought, that landed somewhere below the chest in a place that has no name. I did not cry. I want to note that. I would have expected to cry. Instead, I felt very cold and very still, and I sat in my husband's chair in front of my husband's laptop, and I looked at the folder called Receipts, and I thought, he kept them. He kept every single receipt. He labeled the folder. He organized it. Some part of me, the project manager, the woman who built timelines and tracked deliverables, understood with a nauseating precision that this was not a mistake. This was not a moment of weakness. This was managed. This was curated. He had kept records. I took out my phone. My fingers were shaking very slightly just at the tips. I photographed every document in that folder, all 47. Then I closed the folder, moved the browser window back into place, and closed the laptop lid to exactly the angle I had found it. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen. I filled a glass with cold water from the tap and drank all of it standing at the sink, looking out at the back garden, at the iron chairs and the white table, at the patio we had built together on a weekend in May 3 years ago, sweating and laughing and arguing about whether the stones were level. I set the glass down. I went back to the sofa. I opened my own laptop. I pulled up the project timeline I had been editing. I stared at it for 40 minutes without seeing a single line. Daniel came home at 8:15. He smelled of soap. Freshly showered, a detail I absorbed with a detachment that surprised me. He came into the living room, said he was starving, asked if I wanted him to order Thai food. His face was open, ordinary, the face of a man coming home from a long Thursday. Nothing in it that I could read as guilt or fear or caution. That was the second blow. How good he was at it. How practiced. How entirely, fluently normal. I said yes to the Thai food. I said I was tired and had a headache. We ate at the coffee table with the television on, and he told me about a student who had delivered a remarkable closing argument at practice. And I listened and nodded and said the right things. And inside me, there was nothing but that cold, level silence, like the surface of a lake in November. I needed more. I knew that. Photographs of hotel receipts were evidence, but they were not confession. They were not the name, spoken aloud. They were not the proof that would hold up in the conversation I knew was coming in the room I had to build before I detonated it. The next morning, Daniel left for school at 7:30. I waited 10 minutes, long enough to be certain he hadn't forgotten anything, and then I went back to his desk. I opened the laptop. I went into his email. I had never done this before in 6 years of marriage, and my heart was a fist knocking against my sternum as I typed his email address into the login field. I didn't know his password. I sat back. I looked around the desk at the small clutter of a man who used a space daily, a charging cable, 2 pens, a notepad with handwritten reminders. And then I looked at the notepad. In the bottom corner, in small, neat letters, passwords. Under it, a short list. His email was third on the list. He had written his passwords on a notepad on his open desk. I thought, absurdly, of all the times I had told him this was a security risk. I logged in. I searched Maya's name. There were 214 emails. I read for 3 hours. I sat at that desk in the pale morning light with the house entirely quiet around me, and I read every single one. And with each one, the cold inside me grew more precise, more structured, less like grief, and more like something else entirely, something harder. The emails went back 16 months, 2 months further than the hotel receipts. They had met at a work event of Maya's that Daniel had attended with me in July of the year before. I remembered that event. I remembered the 4 of us, Daniel, Maya, me, and Tom, standing at a high table with cocktails, laughing about something Tom had said. I had been happy that evening. I had thought, I am lucky to have people like this in my life. In the emails, Daniel called her his people. He said she understood him in ways he had stopped expecting anyone to. He said he had been going through the motions for years. There was one email sent on a Tuesday night in December that said, Clara is a good person. That's what makes this so hard. I don't want to hurt her, but I also don't know how to go back to what we were. I read that sentence 4 times. I don't want to hurt her. He had wanted very badly not to hurt me. He had done an exceptional job, but it was the second to last email in the thread, sent just 9 days ago, that stopped my breath entirely. It was from Maya, short, 5 lines. She said that Tom had found out. She said he was threatening to tell me. She said Daniel needed to decide what he was going to do, and he needed to decide quickly, because she was not going to let Tom blow everything up on his timeline. Tom knew. I closed the laptop. I sat very still. The house ticked and settled around me the way old houses do. Somewhere outside, a bird called once and was answered. I thought about Tom. Quiet, patient Tom, the architect who had loved Maya for 2 years. And I thought about what it had cost him to find out. And I thought about the fact that he had been sitting with this knowledge for some unknown number of days, deciding what to do with it, while I had been tasting caramel frosting samples for my husband's birthday party. I picked up my phone. I had Tom's number. We had been to dinner together enough times that it was simply there, in my contacts, filed under Tom A. My thumb hovered over it for a long moment. Then I put the phone down, stood up, and went to get dressed. There were things I needed to do before I made any calls. There were things I needed to put in order first, because the woman who was going to walk out of this situation was not going to do it unprepared. That cold, precise thing inside me had a shape now. It had direction. It was pointing somewhere, and I intended to follow it all the way to the end. I called Tom that same afternoon from my car, parked 2 blocks from the house beneath an oak tree already shedding its leaves. He picked up on the second ring. There was a pause after I said my name, not the pause of someone surprised, but the pause of someone who has been waiting and doesn't know how to begin. "Clara," he said finally. His voice was careful and tired in a way that told me he had been carrying this for longer than 9 days. "How much do you know?" "Enough," I said. "I need to know the rest." He told me everything. He had found out 6 weeks ago. A notification on Maya's phone left on the kitchen counter, almost the same way I had found Daniel's calendar entry. He had confronted her that same night. She had not denied it. She had cried and said she was sorry and said it had gotten out of hand and that she wanted to fix things. He had asked her to end it. She had said she would. She had not. He found a new email 2 weeks later, opened on her laptop while she was in the shower. Maya had written to Daniel, "He's backing down. We just need to be more careful, more careful." The words landed in my chest like something thrown hard. Tom had spent 2 weeks deciding whether to call me. He felt I had the right to know, but he also felt, his voice broke slightly here, that once he made that call, everything would be irreversible. He had been hoping she would tell me herself. "She was planning to come to Daniel's birthday party," I said. "She helped me plan it." Tom was quiet for a moment. "I know," he said. I thanked him. I meant it. I told him I was sorry. I meant that too. We said goodbye, and I sat in the car with leaves falling in slow, irregular intervals onto the windshield, and I let myself feel, for exactly 5 minutes, everything I had been holding at arm's length. The grief, enormous and shapeless, tasting of iron, the humiliation of having been the last to know, the particular devastation of losing 2 people at once, like a fire that takes the house, and every photograph inside it in a single stroke. 5 minutes. Then I stopped. I started the car. I drove to the office of a family law attorney named Patricia Okafor, whose name I had looked up that morning and saved under P.O., so it looked like nothing. Patricia had a firm handshake and an office with a good view of the river. I laid out everything, receipts, emails, screenshots, timeline, in the same tone I would use to present a project to a client. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You've done my job for me. Now let me do the rest." On Monday, I asked Daniel to sit down at the kitchen table. I set 2 mugs of coffee between us, the way we always did when we had something to discuss, and I placed my phone on the table, screen up, open to the photographs of the hotel receipts. I watched his face as he looked at the screen. I have thought about that moment many times since, and what I remember most is not the color draining from it, though that happened, but the brief, almost imperceptible flicker that preceded it. A calculation. He was thinking about damage control before he was thinking about me. "Clara," he started. "Don't," I said. My voice was quiet. "Please don't say my name like that." He looked at the table. His hands went very still. "I know about Maya," I said. "I know it's been 16 months. I know about Hotel Renard and the Marquette and the Lakeview Inn. I know about the bracelet." I paused. "I know about Tom." At Tom's name, he looked up. "How long have you known?" he asked. "Long enough," I said. "Why What followed was quieter and worse than any dramatic confrontation I might have imagined. Daniel did not shout or defend himself with any real force. He talked in a low, careful voice, offering explanations that were really excuses arranged in a gentler order. He said he had been unhappy for a long time, that things with Maya had happened gradually, that he had never intended for it to become what it became. He said he was sorry. He said it more than once, as if repetition might manufacture sincerity. I let him finish. Then I said, "You wrote her name on a bracelet. You kept every receipt and labeled the folder. You were not confused. You made a decision over and over again for 16 months while I was sitting in this house planning your birthday party." I looked at him across the table, across the 2 untouched mugs. "The problem is not that you were unhappy. The problem is that you looked me in the face every single day and chose not to tell me." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, very quietly, "I know." I called Maya the next morning without warning. I said I needed to see her, that I was having a hard time with something and needed my best friend. She came within the hour, knocked on the door with her coat still on, her expression arranged into the attentive shape of someone ready to listen. I let her walk into the kitchen. On the table, I had laid out 12 printed emails, chosen carefully, including the one that said, "Clara is a good person," and the one that said, "We just need to be more careful." She saw them from the doorway. She stopped. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard in that kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, a pipe knocked once in the wall. "Clara," she said. "I don't need you to explain," I said. "I've read everything. I just needed you to know that I know, and I needed to look at you while you understood that." She cried. They were real tears, which made it worse. Real tears meant she had genuinely cared about me and had betrayed me anyway. She said she was sorry, that she didn't know how it had happened, that she had been about to end it, that she loved me and had always loved me, that what she had done was the worst thing she had ever done in her life. I let her finish. I handed her the box of tissues I had placed on the counter the night before. I said, "I believe that you're sorry, and I need you to leave." She left. The divorce proceedings were orderly and, in their way, almost anticlimactic. Daniel did not contest much. He moved into an apartment in early November, taking his history books and his whiskey glasses. I kept the house, the vintage plates, the white patio table, the caramel sofa. The joint account was separated. The mortgage was refinanced in my name. I changed the locks, not out of anger, but out of simple procedural logic. I had the sage green bedroom repainted the same color. It wasn't about erasing anything. It was still a good color. I did not cancel the restaurant reservation, the one I had made for Daniel's birthday party. I kept it. On the original date, I arrived with 6 of my closest friends, women who had sat with me through the worst of it and never asked me to forgive faster than I was ready to. We ordered the good wine and we talked for 3 hours, and at one point someone made me laugh so hard I spilled my water and had to press my napkin to my face, and the feeling was so ordinary and so whole that it caught me off guard completely. That was when I cried. Finally. Not from grief, but from recognition, from understanding, in the body rather than in the mind, that I was still entirely irreducibly myself, that they had not taken that. Whatever had been hollowed out and replaced with a careful performance of a life over those 16 months, the actual architecture of me, the organized, stubborn, clear-eyed core, was still standing. I kept the house. I donated Daniel's history books to the school library, which felt right and also gave me a satisfaction I will not pretend not to have felt. I filled the empty shelves with my own books. I started going to the farmer's market alone on Saturday mornings, buying the honey, eating the cinnamon rolls at the corner bakery, and after a while it stopped feeling like absence and started feeling like mine. I sat on the back patio on a Saturday morning in late December, 2 months after Daniel had taken his boxes and gone. The air was cold and very clear. I had brushed the frost from the iron chairs with my sleeve, and I sat with my coffee in the kind of silence that is not empty but full of the quiet, unglamorous peace of a woman who has walked through something and come out the other side with her eyes open. A bird landed on the white table and flew away again. The morning was very bright. I had trusted 2 people completely, and they had made a choice. And then I had made mine. And my choice had looked like this: a spreadsheet, a folder of screenshots, a family law attorney with a good view of the river, a box of tissues placed deliberately on a counter the night before, a restaurant reservation kept. There is no clean lesson at the end of this. There is only the house, which is mine, and the morning, which is mine, and the particular, stubborn fact of myself, still here, still standing, still entirely unwilling to be the last thing in the room that isn't secured down. Tom texted me once, in January, a single line that said, "I hope you're doing well." I wrote back, "I am. I really am." And that was the truth, the first completely unguarded truth I had spoken in a very long time. Some doors close and take everything with them. Some doors close and leave the light exactly where it needs to be,